That's what we strive for around these parts. Mike Dempsey, Tony Smith, ET here with you on the daily, regular basis. And joining us on a semi-regular basis, our man with the Florida Times-Union, formerly of Big Cat Country. I want to get to them a little bit later this morning. They've got some interesting things out there. But Demetrius Harvey joins us right now. What's up, Demetrius? How are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How about you guys?
We're well. What's not to be happy about right now, right? Jags.
Yeah, it's spring.
Right, spring. Jags are healthy. Optimism surrounds the franchise and all that good stuff. You've been out there. They're only open once a week to the media, so give Tony and ET and myself an observation or two that has caught your eye to get us started today.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard. I mean, you've been out there. It's hard to really glean
No doubt.
too much of anything from these OTAs. They're really not doing much. But really, I think the biggest thing that you could take away from this is not only does Trevor Lawrence look like Trevor Lawrence, he looks good. You don't really have to talk about him much, but I feel like his relationship with, guys like Ridley, obviously, and then, other guys like Christian Kirk and all the other receivers, it's really cool to see Trevor sort of taking that leadership role to the next level by talking to them right after the play, making sure everything's working fluidly. I think that's the biggest thing. You wanted to see carryover from last year and how they, performed last year during this time and see if it translated to this season. So far, so good in that aspect. I just think that it's sort of being well run, and I think that's all you really can expect or want from OTAs.
Yeah, I think, we've discussed that big year 2 to year 3 jump that I think we're all anticipating for Trevor Lawrence this year, and it's nice to hear that early on at OTAs, it appears that he's a player that's in control out there in the offense. Does anything beyond that feel different at this year's OTAs with Doug Peterson just going into year 2 compared to last year at this time?
Honestly, not too much different, and that's a good thing to me. I think that the consistency in which Doug has had with all of his practices, last year and then leading into this year, obviously, I think that stayed, and you can see that players understand where they need to be. The veterans are taking care of the rookies in terms of getting them lined up, helping them after practice, before practice, things like that. I really think that, the way it's set up and how it's run, it just really seems smooth. I think that's something that, in years past, it wasn't like that. 2021, it definitely wasn't like that. So I think that if there's something to take away beyond just, Trevor looks good or, the offense looks fine, it's just that it's really well organized. It's something that, clearly Doug cares a lot about. And I'm just curious now, last year they didn't force the vets to come to mandatory minicamp. I'm curious if that's going to be the case this year.
Yeah, that is curious. I mean, the word mandatory would seem to indicate that that's probably the direction it should head. What do you make of Josh Allen's continued absence? I know Doug Peterson says the right things, which he's smart to do. It's voluntary. And, Tom Coughlin kind of got the team in a little hot water before, talking about how he expects players to be there for voluntary stuff and all that. So what do you think behind the scenes is going on here? Is it much ado about nothing, or is there a little to be concerned about?
Yeah, I always go back to the word voluntary. I really think that that's something to key in on. I mean, these guys don't have to show up. Yeah, sure, it would be nice to have everybody there to, build the team up a little bit more, further your practice with your teammates. But guys like Josh, who've been around the league for a few years now, they might have their own plans. They might have, their own workout schedules that they want to do to get ready for training camp or the mandatory portions of the off season. So for me, I haven't heard anything necessarily to do with contract or any of that nature. So I don't expect it to be the case that's why. It doesn't really make sense either, considering, he put into his fifth-year option, making around $11 million this year. I don't think that that's necessarily something that he's going to fight against too much. So, yeah, I don't really make too much of Josh Allen being absent. He doesn't necessarily have to be there, or he actually doesn't have to be there. So it's just a situation where he's sort of working out on his own most likely, and then he'll be ready for when it's time to be ready.
Yeah, I was driving around last night. I heard Rick Ballou discussing how he felt like this is a negotiating ploy by Josh Allen. I'm thinking, he has some really bad representation. Does he really think, why with the Jags rip up this deal unless he gave them a team-friendly kind of contract, to extend him, Demetrius. I don't see anything happening until he shows that he's playing at a higher level. Maybe it comes mid-season. Maybe it comes, with a franchise tag, and we know there are going to be multiple candidates there. But I can't imagine that he or his representatives think he has any real leverage in this situation. Do they?
No, they couldn't. I mean, just last year he had 7 sacks, I believe. The year before, we all know what happened. Just I really don't think that contract makes any sense. I think that it makes sense for the Jags from their perspective, probably to let his season play out, let his last season play out, and see if he's that 12 to 14 sack guy or even double digits at all. And he makes a significant impact, then you can start discussing contract negotiations. I do know that the Jags don't necessarily like to do contract extensions during the season, so I would expect if it doesn't happen before the season, which is very unlikely, then it probably won't happen until after the season, and that's when you get into the franchise tag and all that other stuff. So, yeah, I don't really see this as a negotiation tactic. Like you said, they don't really have much leverage there, so I'm not sure what they would do. They're locked into the 5th year, so there's really nothing in that realm that I can really see.
We have a poll question up today, Demetrius, where we're asking which Jaguars player has the most to prove in this season. And the 2 of the players we included in that were Josh Allen, who we've been discussing here, and Trayvon Walker on the other side, their other edge rush guy for this football team at this point. What are your expectations for Trayvon Walker going into year 2?
Yeah, I expect him to take a pretty big jump. I mean, that should be the expectation for all of these guys coming into year 2. I think that he's going to have a better technically sound game. Now, whether or not that translates into high percentage pressures or sacks, that remains to be seen. I do expect him to have more sacks than his 3.5 that he had this year. I thought that he showed, at least in spurts. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny in spurts. You saw a lot of what Trayvon Walker could bring to the table. You even saw that in week 1 against the Commanders. He got that quick sack and, obviously tapered off a lot down the stretch there. But I think that they sort of figured out a little bit more of how to use him, maybe moving him to more hand in the ground kind of play or standing him up somewhat, less frequently, just to take advantage of his strength and sort of where his leverage is. So I really think that Trayvon is in for a bit of an uptick, not to say that he's going to, shock the league and become the defensive MVP or anything like that. But, obviously I think that he's going to have a bit of a uptick and sort of raise his game to the next level, at least as far as where he's at last year.
Well, take the edge rushers out. You can name any other player on the roster other than Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. Who does have the most to prove this year?
That's a good question. Well, honestly, Calvin Ridley, I feel like is the perfect answer for that because, he's a guy, obviously, he hasn't been around the league for a couple years, basically. He hasn't really had a helmet on. He talked about that the other day. He's still getting used to having a helmet on again. So I think that, he's a guy that has a lot to prove. I think that there's obviously a lot of expectations on him. Everybody, has high expectations for him. They think, 1,400 yards. He thinks that way too. We're all coming out to OTAs and saying how great he looks. I think that the expectations are incredibly high on Calvin Ridley. So he has a lot to prove. He's going into his final year of his contract as well. There's going to be a lot of discussions about that throughout the season. There's a lot of, draft capital questions that are going to be answered. So I think, Calvin Ridley definitely has the most to prove out of all the Jaguars.
Without talking about whatever specifics that we can't get into this time of year, what have been your early impressions of Anton Harrison and Walker Little specifically on what looks to be a shifting offensive line this year?
Yeah, for offensive line, it's almost impossible to tell exactly how well they're doing in these practices. But I will say that, having Anton Harrison at right tackle, Doug's already discussed that. He's been playing that position. He could play different positions, but for now he's at right tackle. I think that, having him there next to Brandon Sheriff, it's been great. You can see they're communicating on the field. It doesn't really look like anything's lost a step. The same with Walker Little at at left tackle. It seems like they're all running in cohesion. Maybe there's a couple of, false starts, not necessarily from Anton or Walker, but just in general. And that's something that, you sort of have to go through during these OTAs. This is pretty much a brand new offensive line with two different tackles than it was a season ago at this time. You have, the left guard, Ben Bart, still sort of, coming back from that injury. So there's a lot of movement on the offensive line. I think that's the most important thing to watch for as we keep going.
Let's presume Ben Barch is healthy by training camp, right? Or somewhere around there, fully healthy, right? And I don't know his exact status right now. I don't know if anybody really does. But do you think, like last year, he wins that job outright? I mean, or is it his job to lose, or because he didn't play that much, it's a full-on competition with he and Shatley?
I think they would want him to win, and that's just because of his size. 6'6", 315.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Tyler Shatley's around 6'3", 300, something like that. So, I think that they want to be bigger inside. I think that they want Ben Bart to absolutely win that job. And that's sort of what happened last year. They wanted him to win it last year, too. They wanted Tyler Shatley in there because they had Luke Fortner, a rookie center. It's better to have a guy like Tyler next to him to sort of guide him as he continues. So, at the end of the day, they wanted Ben Barch in there. They got him in, and I think that that's sort of something similar to what we'll see this year. Now, obviously, his knee and the health of that is going to play a huge role. If he's available for the start of training camp, which Trent Baalke wasn't completely sure of right before the draft, so it's going to be interesting to see. But, ultimately, I do think that Ben Barch is the guy that they want to start. I think that he probably will start as long as he looks fine coming off that knee injury.
What was your reaction to the team bringing in Brandon McManus as the new kicker, and what have been your first impressions of him out there at OTAs?
Yeah, I was kind of, honestly, when it happened, I was like, that makes sense. And I was kind of surprised by the sort of backlash that they got for releasing him, or releasing Riley, just because, last year, obviously, Riley had a pretty good pretty good run down the end there, but, it seemed like most of his kicks were, 30, 40. They weren't very, low percentage kicks in terms of, being able to be made. He made 3 50-yard field goals. I think that Brandon McManus, obviously a 10th-year veteran, he's had a lot of pedigree. He's been pretty good throughout his whole career. Obviously, he had a bit of a down year last year, but he also kicked 2 60-plus yarders and missed those. So you have to sort of adjust for that. But I think that what they wanted is a guy with a bigger leg. They said that they wanted somebody who could kick the ball, on kickoffs all the way out of the back of the end zone consistently. I think that's an issue that they had with Patterson last year. So there were a couple of reasons why they went after him, and I thought it just made sense. And, seeing him at the OTAs the other day, you can sort of see that. He made a 53-yarder. I think he might have made a 55-yarder near the end. So, it was just a situation where they wanted a guy with a stronger leg, maybe a little bit more consistent, and I think that's what they probably got.
Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, I thought it was interesting, the whole narrative of, he reached out to us. I saw a report that he reached out to 6 teams, so, yes, he did. And you were among the half dozen that he was interested in playing for. But it certainly sounded like the other day, like, oh, wow, like this is specifically got to play in Jacksonville. And, nice to be included, which wasn't always the case over the years. I got to ask you, because until it gets settled, we'll continue to do this. But how does it get resolved with Evan Ingram?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the same situation I think that they've been in since before. It's something where they're still negotiating. They still want, X value, and Evan wants Y value, and it just hasn't met in the middle yet. I think that's going to be the case, and they have until July 17th to figure this out, and that's sort of where it's at. I don't expect Evan Ingram to show up. He doesn't have to show up for mandatory. He's technically not even on the roster.
Correct.
So I don't expect him to show up until that's.
But what's your guess? Is he on the franchise tag this year, or does a multi-year deal get done? Meaning anything over 1 year of an extension?
Mm-hmm. If I had to guess, I feel like it's going to get done.
Okay.
I don't have too much to back that up. It's just the sense I get and how valuable, going back to even the scouting combine, how highly they talked about him, how much they really wanted to get that done. Talking with Trent Baalke, the same thing. It just makes sense that they would want to get this resolved. I think that they think highly of him. Evan obviously thinks highly of himself, as he should. And so, I think it's a situation that will get resolved.
We're not going to be asking these kind of questions about Dalvin Cook whenever that happens up in Minnesota, which feels like it could be imminent that he gets released at some point here in the next few days. But should the Jaguars have any interest in wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like any other year it would have been a yes. And I still, lean towards that just because of the receiver that he is. Do I think that they would have interest? I really don't think so. I mean, we'll probably ask Doug that on Monday. But, they have a lot of guys. They have Calvin Ridley, they have Christian Kirk, they have Zay Jones, they have Evan Ingram. They drafted Brenton Strange. They have Travis Etienne. They have a lot of weapons, a lot of guys, and there's not enough footballs to go around. So I feel like, you're going to be in a situation where one of those guys will be the odd man out, whether that's, most likely, obviously, Zay Jones. But you're paying a lot of money into that position. So I just can't imagine you're going to sort of handicap yourself a little bit, because I imagine that, Hopkins would want, if I were him, I would want the same, price tag that Odell Beckham Jr. got, that $15 to $18 million, if not more, over a longer term. So to me, I don't feel like they're going to be interested in that. Would I do that? I think so, if the price was right.
Yeah, to me, it'd have to be a one-year team-friendly kind of deal. I'm not committing any kind of long-term at this stage with the situation they've got. All right, Demetrius, it's been a fun ride, but are you ready for the Nuggets to dash your dreams?
Yeah, well, it's not going to happen because we're going to win. We're probably going to we're going to sweep the Nuggets. That's my prediction. And we're going out strong. This has been an amazing year for the Miami Heat. I love it.
Yeah, nice runner-up. What do you get a trophy for that? You got the Eastern Conference trophy. So
Eastern Conference trophy.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. You can hang that in the trophy room. All right, Demetrius Harvey can be found on Twitter at Demetrius82, and, of course, covering the Jaguars for the Florida Times-Union. Demetrius, until the next time, thanks, buddy.
All right, thanks. I appreciate you guys.